Good morning, Alex. Can you test your audio, please?
Yes, is it working okay?
Yeah,
Can you
sounds
hear
great.
me?
Thank you very much. Good morning, Jeff. Can you test your audio, please? Not yet. Unmute?
Unmute, yeah.
Yeah,
Hi.
that's it. Thank you very much.
Okay, good.
Good morning. My name is Julia Rady and I'm the chair of the Toronto Preservation Board. The clerk has confirmed that we have quorum, so I will now call meeting 28 of the Toronto Preservation Board to order. Welcome, everyone. This is a hybrid meeting with some members, staff, and public attending in person and others connecting by video conference over the WebEx platform or calling in. And this meeting is also being live streamed online at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. Because we are meeting in person and remotely, we ask for your patience with any delays and technical issues. If you are registered to speak at today's meeting, please listen for me to call your name, and I will call speakers in the order they appear on the list. And the speakers list can be viewed online by visiting the Toronto Preservation Board at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. I would like to request that staff and invited participants, as well as all observers joining remotely, keep their video turned off unless they need to speak or answer questions, and this will make it easier for me as chair to see the members as we debate and vote on the agenda items. I also ask that members keep their microphones muted unless you wish to question staff or speak to an item. If members wish to speak on an item, please make sure your video is on and raise your hand or unmute your mic and indicate your intention to speak, and I will create a speakers list. When voting on an item or a motion, I ask members to turn on your video and raise your hand to indicate your vote, and if there is a recorded vote, you will be asked to state if you are in favor or opposed. Members, the City Clerk has provided all agenda materials on toronto.ca/council. As a reminder, please submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at hertpb@toronto.ca to help with motions. And although we may be meeting in different locations today, the Preservation Board would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you do have an interest, please raise your hand or unmute your mic and indicate the item number and the nature of the interest. Seeing none, may I please have a motion to confirm the minutes from our meeting on January 31st, 2025? It was so long ago. Gosh, thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you, and the motion carries. So now we'll proceed to the agenda review. PB 28.1, 877 to 885 Lawrence Avenue East, Notice of Intention to Designate a Property under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act. There is a presentation from Heritage Planning staff available if the board would like to hear it. Would anybody like to hold this item? Alex and Jeff. Moving on, PB 28.2, 481 and 483 Church Street, inclusion on the Heritage Register. We have a presentation from Heritage Planning staff available. Would anybody like to hold this item? Seeing none, would anybody like to remove the recommendations in the staff report? Paul, all those in favor, please? Motion carries. Moving on to PB 28.3, 65 Heward Avenue and 135R Berkeley Street, inclusion on the Heritage Register. We have a presentation from Heritage Planning staff available if we would like to hear it. Would anybody like to hold this item? Peter and Jeff, thank you. Next, we have PB 28.4, 4658 Spadina Avenue and 378 Wellington Street, alterations to and demolition of buildings at heritage properties designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. There's a presentation from staff available if we'd like to hear it. Would anybody like to hold this item? Seeing, Alex, you want to hold the item? Okay, thank you very much. And now we move all the way back to PB 28.1, and I will invite Patrick.
Sorry, Chair, I'm unable to hear anything.
Okay, Matthew, hold on one moment here. We might have a little microphone issue.
My apologies.
Is that better, Matthew? Perfect.
I will, if you go back to the previous slide, I'll start. The subject properties at 877 and 885 Lawrence Avenue East are located on the south side of Lawrence Avenue East and northwest of the Don Way West. The subject properties are mid-20th century purpose-built bank branches constructed to serve the post-war Don Mills community, and both have continuously operated for nearly 70 years. The design and development of the properties were coordinated together. Next slide. The property at 877 Lawrence Avenue East, known as the Bank of Montreal Don Mills branch, contains a one-story international-style pavilion bank building constructed for the Bank of Montreal in 1956 and expanded in 1967. The property at 885 Lawrence Avenue East, known as the Bank of Nova Scotia Don Mills branch, also contains a one-story international-style pavilion bank building constructed for the Bank of Nova Scotia, Scotiabank, in 1956 and expanded between 1966 and 1967. Next slide. The properties are a unique example of a pair of banks designed as an ensemble in a unified architectural style set within a shared landscape. This was a departure for competing banks, which developed their properties individually to differentiate themselves. Designed in the international style by John B. Park and Associates, the near-identical buildings adhere to the modernist design requirements for Don Mills. Remarking on their design after opening in 1957, the Globe and Mail noted, individual banks have taken pride in their buildings for a long time and have used artistic embellishment, but this is different, a case of considering the architectural character of the community as a whole. Next slide, please. Named after the many 19th century mills that line the Don River and designed by landscape architect Macklin Hancock, the master planned community of Don Mills is considered by many to be the most influential planned community of the last century in Canada. Combining Garden City principles and modernist design, Don Mills would be a complete community for 28,000 residents with housing, schools, recreation facilities, more than 70 industries, and one of Canada's earliest suburban shopping plazas. Divided into 4 quadrants by Lawrence Avenue East and Don Mills Road, the community was organized around a commercial and civic area. Surrounding residential neighborhoods were isolated from heavy traffic by looping roads and cul-de-sacs, while light industry was located on the periphery. With a high degree of attention paid to everything from positioning, architectural style, exterior materials, and colors of the buildings, it was the first community with an entirely modernist aesthetic. Next slide, please. The modernist movement began in the late 19th century as a response to significant social, economic, political, and technological change. Following the First World War, advancements in engineering, building materials, health, and industry, along with growing social equality, contributed to the development of the modernist architectural movement. Rejecting past historical styles, modernist architecture is characterized by the use of manufactured building materials, including glass, steel, and concrete, the principle of functionalism, where form follows function, minimalist design, and the rejection of ornament. The international style was first developed in the 1920s by a small group of prominent architects, including Walter Gropius, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, Jacobus Johannes Peter Oud, and Le Corbusier. The style's name was first used in architect Philip Johnson and historian Henry Russell Hitchcock's 1932 Museum of Modern Art exhibition titled The International Style, Architecture Since 1922. Guided by 3 principles, volume over mass, an aesthetic ordering of structural members and standard modular components, and the avoidance of applied decoration. Following the Second World War, the international style would become the dominant modernist architectural style in the middle of the 20th century. For this reason, it is often mistakenly used interchangeably with modernist architecture, which, as a movement, fostered a variety of architectural styles. Common characteristics of the international style include strong rectilinear forms, light, taut plane surfaces, stripped of applied ornamentation and decoration, open interior spaces, and visual weightlessness using cantilever construction. Building materials were primarily of glass and steel, often with less visible reinforced concrete. Designs often feature glass curtain walls that span the steel girders forming the structure's skeleton. The international style's most prominent proponent, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, known for his less is more approach, sought to reduce his buildings to skeletons of polished metal with glass skins, which achieved their beauty through a clear articulation of structure and proportional relationships and refined detailing. This was expressed in his pavilion-style structures, beginning with the 1928 Barcelona Pavilion in Spain, and would include many other notable structures, including the 1951 Farnsworth House in Plano, Illinois, the 1968 New National Gallery in Berlin, Germany, the 1969 former Imperial Gas Station on Nuns Island, Montreal, and the 1969 Toronto Dominion Centre Bank Pavilion, where John B. Park and Associates served as the architects of record. Like traditional pavilions, these structures featured open interior spaces and a nearly invisible interface between the interior and exterior, which was achieved through slender steel columns and large glass panels. Like traditional pavilions, their placement within a planned landscape was a defining characteristic. Founded in 1947 by brothers John B. and Edmund T. Parkin, along with John C. Parkin, of no relation, John B. Parkin Associates would become the largest mid-20th century architectural firm in Canada. In 1950, the firm won 5 of the Massey Medals for Architecture in its inaugural year, a record for the highest number of medals awarded to a firm in a single year. During this period, the firm designed a number of important international-style structures, including Toronto's Part 4 designated Ontario Association of Architects headquarters at 50 Park Road, Rosedale Subway Station, and the Sun Life Building at 200 University Avenue. They were also responsible for Ottawa's Union Station in 1966, which is designated under the Heritage Railway Stations Protection Act. John B. Park and Associates also collaborated on prominent projects, including the master plans for both York University and Brock University, and as architects of record for Toronto's Part 4 designated City Hall and Toronto Dominion Centre. John B. Park and Associates also made a substantial contribution to Don Mills, designing the Don Mills Convenience Centre, Orthopharmaceutical Limited's plant and offices, the Bata Building, IBM headquarters, Imperial Oil's Ontario Regional Headquarters, Don Mills Collegiate and Junior High School, and their own offices. John Cresswell Parkin, considered to be one of the most important post-war architects in Canada, was described by the Ontario Association of Architects as a pioneer of the international style in Canada. After graduating from the University of Manitoba's School of Architecture in 1944, Parkin moved to Toronto, where he briefly worked at the offices of Morandi and Morris. In 1946, he moved to Boston to study at Harvard's Graduate School of Design, where he attended classes taught by Walter Gropius and Marcel Brauer, who are viewed as having introduced the modernist movement to North America. When John C. Parkin returned to Toronto after graduating in 1947, he founded the firm of John B. Parkin Associates with John B. Parkin and Edmund Parkin, where he served as chief designer. Over his 4-decade career, John C. Parkin received numerous awards for his contributions to architecture, urban planning, industrial design, and education. These included 40 Massey Medals for Architecture, appointment as a Companion of the Order of Canada, the Queen's Silver Jubilee Medal, the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada Gold Medal, and 2 honorary doctorates. Reflecting on his impact, Toronto Star columnist Christopher Hume noted in 1991, more than just about anyone else, it was Parkin who dragged Toronto and Canada kicking and screaming into the modern age. It was also Parkin who brought a bigger perspective to architectural issues. Next slide, please. The properties at 877 and 885 Lawrence Avenue East have design and physical value as rare examples of international-style structures in the main commercial area of Don Mills. Once the defining architectural style of the main commercial area, many international-style structures were lost to redevelopment, including the Massey Medal for Architecture winning Don Mills Convenience Centre. Today, the properties comprise 2 of only 4 international-style structures remaining in the main commercial area. Both properties have design and physical value as a unique example of 2 separate bank buildings designed and built as a cohesive ensemble in the same architectural style within a shared landscape. Nearly identical in design, both properties are set back from Lawrence Avenue and are separated by an open central area incorporating both properties and the public right-of-way between them. The property at 885 Lawrence Avenue has further design and physical value as a representative example of an international-style bank pavilion. Its rectangular plan, flat roof supported by regularly spaced metal columns, recessed exterior walls comprised primarily of glass panels, and lack of applied ornamentation are hallmarks of the international style, while its freestanding form, one-story massing, and placement within a landscape with deep setback reflect defining features of an international-style pavilion. The properties at 877 and 885 Lawrence Avenue East have value for their direct association with the development of Don Mills as an entirely modernist planned community. This is reflected through their international-style design and visual relationship to one another, including their unified design and landscape. Both properties are also valued for their association with the architectural firm of John B. Park and Associates, one of Canada's leading modernist and most prolific firms of the 1950s and 60s, which contributed many significant buildings to Toronto during this time. A leading proponent of the international style, the firm played a significant role in the development of Don Mills, designing many of its most important institutional, commercial, and industrial structures. Designed and built in 1956 by John C. Parkin, the firm's chief designer, and described as one of Canada's most important modernist architects, the property formed part of a collection of international-style structures designed by the firm that would define the commercial area of Don Mills. Both properties have further historical and associated value because they contribute to an understanding of the historical development of Don Mills as Canada's first entirely modernist master-planned community. Located within the commercial area of Don Mills, their international style design reflects the various modernist architectural styles that were used in the community's development, while providing evidence of the original character of the commercial area, which has undergone significant redevelopment. Both properties also have value for their association with John C. Parkin, who was a pioneer of the international style of Canada and the chief designer of John B. Parkin Associates from 1947 to 1971. Their scale, form, and massing, and the Bank of Nova Scotia's recessed exterior walls of large glass panels emphasizing volume over mass, and deep overhang roof supported by carefully placed columns providing regularity over symmetry, reflect John C. Parkin's mastering of the international style. Constructed in 1956 as part of the development of the commercial area of Don Mills, both properties are physically, functionally, visually, and historically linked to their surroundings. This linkage is enhanced by their shared international style design, which was in response to the modernist design requirements that were part of the master plan for Don Mills. Constructed as a pair of banks in the same architectural style, set back from Lawrence Avenue within a shared landscape, both properties are physically, functionally, and visually linked to their surroundings. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have questions of staff? Seeing none, is there discussion amongst ourselves? Alex? You're muted, Alex.
I know I'm muted. I couldn't find the button.
Oh.
Yes, so I really enjoyed that presentation from staff. It was very thorough, and I'm familiar with the buildings. I drive by them quite often. I'd just like to make a bit of a pitch, I think, and I know staff is listening, that whereas we have these buildings and a number of other commercial buildings are now recognized on the Heritage Register, a very large part of the Don Mills development, the housing stock, both single family and other modes, are not represented on the register at all. And I think it's a shame, and I hope that can be remedied. Just a few hundred meters actually from these banks is a crescent containing a number of the original model houses of Don Mills. And just year by year, you see these, well, a lot of the houses have been modified, and the carports, which maybe aren't as glamorous as bay and gable houses, are disappearing, but houses themselves are disappearing. And I think something should be done to try to preserve at least some of the residential heritage in Don Mills. So that's my pitch, but good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Other comments or discussion points? Seeing none, I have a staff report with recommendations before us. Would anybody like to move the recommendations of that report? Alex, all those in favor, please. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on to, thank you very much, Patrick. Moving on to PB 28.3. Over there, yeah, for sure.
So Hans, it's going to be for 65 Heward and 135 Berkeley. Okay, everyone can hear me okay with the microphone? Perfect. All right, so my name is Lindsay Parsons, and I'm a heritage planner in heritage planning with the Toronto Heritage Survey team. I'm pleased to present this report today and would like to recognize the support of Claire Forward and Gary Miedema. This report recommends the properties at 65 Heward Avenue and 135 R Berkeley Street for inclusion on the Heritage Register as listed properties. The subject property, next slide. Beautiful, thank you. The subject property at 65 Heward Avenue is located on the east side of Heward Avenue between Carlaw Avenue and Leslie Street in the South Riverdale neighborhood. Staff have undertaken research and evaluation for the property at 65 Heward Avenue and believe that the property has cultural heritage value or interest and meets at least one of the criteria prescribed in Ontario Regulation 906 for including a non-designated property on a municipal register under Section 27 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Constructed in 1914 for the Canadian Ammonia Company Limited, the property's historic structures have design value as representative examples of early 20th century brick factory warehouse type buildings. Contextually, the property has value for contributing to and maintaining the early 20th century industrial character of Eastern Avenue as a hub of manufacturing and industry. Next slide. The subject property at 135 R Berkeley Street is located on the east side of Berkeley Street between Queen Street East and Richmond Street East, and it sits behind a pair of 1890s semi-detached houses which were constructed in the front of the lot. Staff have undertaken research and evaluation for the property at 135 R Berkeley Street and believe that the property has cultural heritage value or interest and meets at least one of the criteria prescribed in Ontario Regulation 906 for including a non-designated property on a municipal register under Section 20 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Constructed in the early to mid-1850s, the subject property has design value as a single-story detached workers' cottage that is a rare early example of this typology in Toronto. Contextually, the property is historically linked to the development of the King Parliament area, which evolved from a 19th century residential and institutional neighborhood to one of Toronto's manufacturing centers in the late 19th and early 20th century. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Do we have questions for staff? Peter.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I noticed that there was a letter of objection filed from a lawyer for the owner of the Heward Street property. And essentially, the letter outlines surprised that they're being listed now, given that the property apparently has undergone some development in recent years. And this is, according to the letter, the first time the property's been identified as having potential heritage value. So obviously it's not ideal where we have a situation where there's an objecting landowner that doesn't support listing. Have there been any recent discussions with the owner, or will there be to discuss the implications of the listing going forward? And are you able to speak to essentially why this property wasn't kind of looked at in the context of some of the more recent development activity and alterations that have been done?
Gary.
Thank you. My name is Gary Miedema, and I'm a project manager with Heritage Planning. And yes, we've also reviewed that letter carefully, and we have been communicating with the owner. We'll continue to communicate with the owner. So this is certainly an opportunity to have that conversation moving forward, and we'll have a chance to address their concerns. In terms of the history of this site, the previous application which they reference led to the development of a parking lot on the north portion, which did not affect this heritage building. And so staff believe that in spite of the, not in spite, that even though there have been changes recently to the building, that the building retains the values that we've spoken to in the listing report.
All right, thank you very much for that. And actually, I have a second question, if I may, in regards to the Berkeley property. Obviously, a very remarkable property for many reasons, not least of which is its age. It's very old. So I'm just looking at the listing statement, and the photo is not great, so it's kind of difficult to get an understanding of what the building looks like all around. I'm a little bit concerned that the listing statement is, for lack of a better word, generic. So could you speak to kind of your assessment of the integrity of the property and how, in its existing condition, it continues to demonstrate design value as you've described in the listing statement?
Sure. And yeah, so this property was nominated and came to our attention because it is very difficult to see. It's in the backyard of a property, fenced. So the photograph reflects the challenges of getting a good image of this property. But what we noted in our review is that we have a small square building with the Regency style roof and all the hallmarks of that Regency style cottage from the 1850s. We've noted in comparison to other cottages on the register, like the Garrison cottages out by Trinity Bellwoods Park, that this is it's a rare typology. So beyond that, there's research to be done. And I think this listing report really allows us to get it onto the register so we can carry on with that research and what this is. But we've just, I think, scratched the surface, and we're looking forward to more research that can be done on this property too moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions of staff? Seeing none, is there discussion amongst ourselves? Seeing none, I have a staff report with recommendations before us. Would anybody like to move the recommendations within that report? I'll do so. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lindsay and Gary. And now moving on to the last item on our agenda, PB 28.4, and Anne is just taking the stage.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Good morning. I am Anne Fisher, a Programme Manager from Heritage Planning, and I'm presenting item PB 28.4 on behalf of Colin Pang, who is the Heritage Planner on this file but is not available today. This proposal relates to the properties at 46 and 48 Spadina Avenue and 378 Wellington Avenue, Wellington Street West. It seeks approval under Section 42 of the Ontario Heritage Act for alterations to the contributing property at 46 Spadina Avenue, demolition of non-contributing buildings at 46 and 58 Spadina Avenue, and the construction of a new 30-storey mixed-use building across the whole site that incorporates the contributing building at 46 Spadina Avenue. Next slide, please. This slide shows the location plan of the site with Spadina Avenue on the east and Wellington Street on the south. On the right is the aerial photograph of the whole site highlighted in red. The site includes 3 parcels of land. Parcel number 1 in red includes the contributing property at 46 Spadina Avenue. This has 3 buildings on it, the main building fronting Spadina Avenue and 2 smaller non-contributing buildings at its rear. The parcel number 2 in green is the non-contributing property at 58 Spadina Avenue, and parcel number 3 in yellow is the non-contributing property at 378 Wellington Street West, which is a parking lot. These properties are all located within the King Spadina Heritage Conservation District Plan. Next slide, please. This slide shows photographs of the different facades of the heritage building at 46 Spadina Avenue. This is known as the Systems Building. It was built in 1907 by the Toronto architectural firm of Heward and Berkeley. It was used for over 50 years for the manufacture of business stationery and included a business training school, the company's headquarters, and a factory. In the late 20th century, it was among the properties in the King Spadina neighbourhood that became associated with the clothing manufacturing industry in Toronto's fashion district. It is a representative example of an industrial commercial building within the King Spadina Heritage Conservation District, and as stated before, it is noted as a contributing property within the King Spadina Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, please. This shows other photographs. On the left of this slide, you can see the photograph of the side of the contributing property at 46 Spadina Avenue, which gives access to the buildings at its rear, the non-contributing buildings at its rear. The top right shows the non-contributing property at 58 Spadina Avenue, and the bottom right shows the view from Wellington Street into the parking lot at 378 Wellington Street. Staff are raising no objection to the demolition of the non-contributing properties on this site, as this is permitted within the policies of the King Spadina Heritage Conservation District Plan. Next slide, please. This slide shows the front elevation of the proposed new building. A 30-storey mixed-use building is proposed with a tower on top, which is set back behind the retained facades of the Systems Building at 46 Spadina Avenue. Next slide, please. This slide shows the proposed ground floor plan on the left and the proposed 5th floor plan on the right. With regard to the ground floor plan, highlighted in blue, you can see the front and side facades that are proposed to be retained in situ. A small part of the rear west wall of the southern side wing would also be retained, with a small section of this being reconstructed. This is shown in blue and green on this slide. The north facade of the Systems Building would be partially reconstructed. This is shown on green on this slide. The Systems Building would be used for retail commercial space on the ground floor with residential amenity space above. The rest of the building would be demolished to allow for the construction of the new 30-storey building. On the right is the proposed 5th floor. This shows the new massing stepped back by 4.9 to 5.4 metres from the front and from 3.12 metres from the south side. The massing of the new building is also set back 4.9 metres from the retained front facade of the Systems Building on its north side to give the heritage building visual prominence from the public realm along Spadina Avenue. Next slide, please. This shows alterations to the heritage building in a bit more detail. The areas in pink show what's being demolished. This includes part of the rear of the building and the rooftop projections. Substantial portions of the heritage building will be retained, and its three-dimensional integrity will be conserved in line with the policies in the King Spadina Heritage Conservation District Plan. Alterations to the ground floor are shown in blue. These include extending the ground floor entrances to the ground to allow for universal access and providing additional window openings along the front facade to support the proposed new retail use. One original ground floor window would, however, be retained to reflect the original ground floor detailing. Next slide, please. This slide shows changes to the north and west facades. On the left is the north facade. In pink is the area shown that is proposed to be removed. The blue shows the parts of this facade that are proposed to be reconstructed. This equates to the first 5 meters of the north facade, which would be reconstructed to its full height. An additional 12-meter section would also be constructed at the lower ground floor and ground floor level, which would separate the new residential lobby from the retail uses proposed in the rehabilitated systems building. On the right is the rear of the building. This shows that most of this is being demolished, with a small part of the side wing which is being reconstructed. Next slide, please. On the left, this is renderings of the proposal. On the left, you can see the step back of the proposed massing. As I stated earlier, this is between 4.9 to 5.4 meters behind the retained front facade. On the right, you can see the 3.12 meter step back of the massing along the south side facade. These step backs are less than that within the Spadina Heritage Conservation District Plan. This seeks step backs of generally 10 metres along Spadina Avenue and generally 5 metres on side elevations. Staff have agreed to accept these step backs on this property as part of the negotiations and settlements at the Ontario Lands Tribunal of the appeal into the Spadina Heritage Conservation District Plan. Staff consider these step backs to be acceptable as part of the OLT settlement and note that no cantilevers are proposed over the new building. Next slide, please. This is a rendering of the front facade. The window openings for most of the front and along the side would be conserved with new windows installed to match the appearance of the original based on archival documentation. Staff have agreed to the enlargement of the ground floor windows as part of the negotiations and settlement of the Ontario Lands Tribunal appeal, one of the appeals into the Spadina Heritage Conservation District Plan. However, one original lower ground floor window will be retained to reference the original fenestration, and a new historically appropriate window would be included here. Other new window openings that were proposed on the front facade were removed in accordance with the policies in the Heritage Conservation District Plan. Also, the proposal includes the reinstatement of the original step roof parapet. In conclusion, staff support the proposals to permit the development of a new 30-storey mixed-use building that conserves substantial portions of the historic systems building. The proposal meets the objectives of the Heritage Conservation District Plan and complies with the provincial and city heritage planning policies, and staff therefore recommend that the proposal is approved under Section 42 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Do we have questions of staff? Karash, yes. You need to just press the button. There you go.
Sorry, Madam Chair, thank you. You can hear me? Okay. In slide 5, I'm wondering whether the exterior wall at the east elevation, which is colored in blue, and the facade in slide 6 are architecturally compatible. Specifically the placement of the 5 doors in the exterior wall seems slightly misaligned with the facade design. You can see 5. They are not. I think that may be because of the duration of the drawings. Maybe in slide 5 at the east elevation, you can see that there's 5 doors, but in the slide 6, you can see, or maybe we can't hear it. You can see that there's only 2. They are different from each other. I think maybe it's a question from the designers, maybe, but I can see there are different, the facade I can see there maybe are the different blueprints.
I haven't got the slides in front of me, but are you talking about the front facade?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
On the front facade, so they are proposing, there are the ground floor windows would be increased to be, so there'll
Yes.
be, those would be increased, but one original window would be kept.
Okay.
And the 2 entrances on the far sides of the building, those would be extended down to the ground.
And the floor plan, I guess it's the ground floor plan. Yes. You can see there are 5 openings. The left one.
You mean the doors?
Yeah, the
Yeah,
doors,
the
yeah,
doors. The final design of the detailed shop fronts have not been finalized. That will be part of the conservation plan. When they have a retailer who's going to take over the property, they will want to put their mark on this. So the final design, in terms of the actual openings, we have agreed to them extending them down to the ground floor level, and the actual detailing of how that will be finished will be determined at the conservation plan stage.
Thank you.
Are there other questions of staff? Alex?
Yes, the clarification of the window system on the Spadina Avenue facade, I think makes a bit more sense to me now. I assume the way the building is set up, there's a raised ground and there's a lower ground below street level. And basically the lower ground level is not going to be featured in the new building. You'll be going directly in at street grade, is that correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, that is correct. This is a property which has a lower ground, so you go down and there is an upper ground. So they're combining it into a double height space that will be accessible from ground level.
Right, and thank you. And for the upper levels, will the floor levels be retained? Is the entire building going to be retained internally and simply modernized, or how will the floor levels relate to the upper windows?
Through you, Madam Chair, the whole of the interior is being removed, so it's going to be a new building on the interior, and there is some double height spaces on the upper floors. The floors will relate to the window openings, the position of the window openings, but there will be some double height spaces. This will be less visible from the public realm than the changes at ground floor level, but there will be some double height spaces, yes.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions of staff? Seeing none, is there discussion amongst ourselves? Seeing none, I have a staff report with recommendations before us. Would anybody like to move the recommendations in the report? Karash, thank you very much. All those in favor? Motion carries, and that concludes our business for today. It will be a little bit more time before our next meeting, so I'll see everybody at the end of March. Be well and safe. Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.